The crystal chandeliers of the Metropolitan Museum cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as Manhattan's elite gathered for the annual Children's Healthcare Gala. Elena Blackwood adjusted her camera strap, the weight of her professional equipment familiar against her shoulder, though tonight it felt heavier than usual. At 6 months pregnant, every movement required more effort, but she wouldn't let anyone else capture this event. Photography wasn't just her profession. It was her sanctuary, her way of seeing truth through artifice. She'd built her reputation, photographing the city's most exclusive events, her keen eye catching moments others missed. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her evenings documenting the lives of people who barely acknowledged her existence, despite her marriage to one of their own. Marcus Blackwood owned half of Manhattan's skyline, his real estate empire, built on calculated risks and ruthless ambition. When they'd met 5 years ago at a gallery opening, Elena had been drawn to his intensity, the way he seemed to command every room he entered. Their whirlwind romance had been the subject of society. Pages, the billionaire and the artist, a modern fairy tale. But fairy tales, Elena had learned, rarely survived the harsh light of reality. Tonight, Marcus was supposed to be in Singapore, closing a deal that would add another billion to his portfolio. He'd kissed her goodbye 3 days ago, his hands briefly, touching her growing belly before he disappeared into his black sedan. "Take care of our little one," he'd whispered, and for a moment she'd glimpsed the man she'd fallen in love with. Elena positioned herself near the grand staircase, her camera ready as guests began arriving. Through her viewfinder, she captured moments of calculated glamour, air kisses that never quite touched cheek, smiles that reached cameras but not eyes, the intricate dance of power and influence that played out in designer gowns and perfectly knotted ties. She was adjusting her lens when she saw him. Marcus stood at the entrance, devastatingly handsome in his custom tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled despite supposedly being on the other side of the world. But it wasn't his unexpected presence that made Elena's breath catch. It was the woman on his arm. Sophia Chen was everything Elena wasn't. Tall where Elena was petite, sleek black hair where Elena had unruly auburn curls, and most notably, not 6 months pregnant. Elena recognized her immediately, Marcus's new head of international development hired 6 months ago. The same 6 months Marcus had been working late, taking mysterious calls, and looking at his pregnant wife with something that might have been regret. Elena's camera remained trained on them, muscle memory taking over as shock paralyzed her thoughts. Through the lens, she watched Marcus lean down to whisper something in Sophia's ear, the gesture intimate and familiar. Sophia laughed, her hand naturally finding its place on his chest, and Elena captured the moment, the ease between them. The way they moved together like they'd done this 100 times before. Her pregnancy had been planned, discussed, celebrated. They'd spent hours painting the nursery, Marcus insisting on the most expensive everything. He'd been attentive, caring, the perfect expectant father. But now, watching him navigate the crowd with another woman, Elena realized how wrong she'd been about everything. She continued photographing, each click of the shutter a small act of self-preservation. Her professional training kicked in, documenting the story unfolding before her with the same attention to detail she'd always prided herself on. She caught the moment Sophia's hand lingered on Marcus's lower back, the way his fingers brushed against hers as they reached for champagne, the private smiles they shared when they thought no one was watching. But Elena was always watching. It was what she did. The gala continued around her, hundreds of New York's most powerful people mingling and networking, unaware of the drama playing out in their midst. Elena moved through the crowd like a ghost, her camera capturing everything, while her heart broke with each frame. She'd built her career on seeing truth in moments others missed, and tonight, that skill was destroying her world. As the evening progressed, she watched Marcus and Sophia dance, their bodies moving together with an intimacy that spoke of secret afternoons and stolen moments. Elena's hand unconsciously moved to her belly, feeling their child move restlessly inside her, as if sensing her distress. She had hundreds of photos by now, a complete documentation of her husband's betrayal, each image a small dagger to her heart. But she kept shooting, because stopping would mean acknowledging what she was seeing, and she wasn't ready for that conversation with herself. Not yet. The music swelled as Elena continued her methodical documentation, each photograph adding another layer to the devastating revelation unfolding before her. She'd moved closer now, her professional instincts overriding the personal anguish threatening to overwhelm her. Through her viewfinder, she captured Marcus guiding Sophia through the crowd, his hand possessively placed on the small of her back, a gesture Elena recognized because it had once been reserved for her. The children's health care? Gala was in full swing, with speeches about hope and healing filling the opulent hall. The irony wasn't lost on Elena that she was documenting the destruction of her own family at an event dedicated to protecting children. Her unborn child shifted inside her, and she pressed her free hand against her belly, drawing strength from the life growing within her. She watched as Marcus introduced Sophia to the Weatherbys, old family friends who'd attended Elena and Marcus's wedding just 3 years ago. Elena captured the moment Mrs. Weatherby's eyebrows raised slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face before social conditioning smoothed her expression back to polite interest. Even from across the room, Elena could read the older woman's thoughts. Where was Marcus's pregnant wife? The auction portion of the evening began, and Elena positioned herself strategically to capture the bidding. Marcus had always been generous at these events, his competitive nature making him bid aggressively on the most coveted items. Tonight was no different, except he whispered his strategies to Sophia instead of Elena. She watched through her lens. As Sophia's eyes widened when Marcus bid $50,000 on a week in Tuscany, their excitement at winning intimate and shared. Elena had photographed dozens of these auctions, but tonight she saw them differently. She noticed how the wives stayed close to their husbands, how couples communicated with subtle glances and gentle touches. She'd always assumed she and Marcus had that same connection, but now she realized how long it had been since they'd shared those wordless conversations. Her pregnancy had changed things between them, she'd noticed, but she'd attributed it to natural adjustment. Now she wondered if it had simply made it easier for Marcus to justify his absences, his late nights, his growing emotional distance. Who would question a devoted husband working harder to provide for his expanding family? The crowd began moving toward the terrace for the final portion of the evening, and Elena followed, her camera capturing the exodus of glittering guests. Outside, the city sparkled below them, a canvas of lights and possibilities. She positioned herself in the shadows, her black dress helping her blend into the background as she continued her surveillance. Marcus and Sophia found a quiet corner near the balustrade, champagne glasses in hand. Elena adjusted her telephoto lens, bringing their faces into sharp focus. What she saw there made her stomach clench. They were in love. This wasn't just an affair or a momentary lapse in judgment. The way Marcus looked at Sophia was how he used to look at Elena, with wonder and possibility, and a future stretching endlessly ahead. She captured the moment Marcus tucked a strand of Sophia's hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly familiar. She'd been on the receiving end of that same tender touch countless times, but it had been months since Marcus had looked at her with such focused attention. Pregnancy had made her feel invisible to him, but now she understood why. His attention was elsewhere. Through her lens, she watched Sophia place her hand over Marcus's heart, and he covered it with his own. They were having an intense conversation, their foreheads nearly touching, and Elena found herself straining to read their lips. Whatever they were discussing was serious, important, the kind of conversation that changed everything. Then Marcus did something that nearly made Elena drop her camera. He pulled out a small velvet box. Elena's hands shook as she focused the lens, her professional training warring with her personal devastation. Through the viewfinder, she watched her husband. Of 3 years, the father of her unborn child proposed to another woman. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth, tears glittering in her eyes as she nodded enthusiastically. The ring, Elena could see it clearly through her zoom lens, was spectacular. Larger and more elaborate than her own wedding band, which suddenly felt heavy on her finger. Marcus slipped it onto Sophia's finger, and Elena captured it all. The kiss they shared, the way Sophia admired the ring, the pure joy on both their faces. Elena lowered her camera, her legs suddenly weak. She gripped the stone balustrade for support, her mind reeling. This wasn't just an affair. Marcus was planning to leave her. The timing couldn't be more brutal. Their baby was due in 3 months. She thought of the nursery they'd decorated. Together, the names they'd debated, the future they'd planned, all of it built on lies. She raised her camera again, driven by some masochistic need to document every moment of her devastation. Through the lens, she watched Marcus and Sophia plan what looked like their escape from the party. They were heading toward the exit, probably to celebrate privately, and Elena found herself following at a distance. In the museum's lobby, she captured their goodbye, passionate and desperate, as if they couldn't bear to part. She photographed Marcus hailing a cab for Sophia, the way he watched until it disappeared into traffic, the satisfied smile on his face as he straightened his bow tie and prepared to return to the party, to return to his lie. Elena stood in the shadows, her memory card full of evidence, her heart empty of hope. Tomorrow, she would have to face the reality of what she'd discovered. She would have to decide what to do with the knowledge that her marriage was over, that her husband was planning a life that didn't include her or their child. But tonight, she had one more role to play. Elena watched Marcus disappear back into the Gala, his shoulders relaxed with the confidence of a man who believed his secret was safe. She remained in the shadows of the museum lobby, her camera heavy in her hands, the weight of evidence and heartbreak pressing down on her like a physical force. Around her, other guests were beginning to leave, their laughter and chatter echoing off the marble walls. But their voices seemed to come from another world. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Running late in Singapore. Hope the gala goes well. Miss you both." The casualness of his lie was breathtaking. Elena stared at the screen, then at her camera's display showing the last image she'd captured. Marcus, kissing his mistress goodbye. The juxtaposition was almost artistic in its cruelty. She made her way to the museum's bathroom, needing a moment to process what had just happened. In the mirror, she saw a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, her auburn hair escaping from its careful updo. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, where their child was growing, oblivious to the destruction of the life Elena had imagined for them. But as she stood there, something shifted inside her. The shock began to crystallize into something sharper, more focused. Elena Blackwood wasn't just Marcus's betrayed wife. She was one of the most sought-after photographers in New York. Woman who had built her career on capturing truth in its rawest form. And tonight, she had documented the most important story of her life. She returned to the gala with renewed purpose. Marcus was holding court near the bar, regaling a group of investors with some story that had them laughing appreciatively. Elena circled the group like a predator, her camera capturing his animated expressions, his confident gestures, the easy way he commanded attention. To anyone watching, it would look like she was simply doing her job, documenting the evening's festivities. "Elena!" Mrs. Weatherby approached, her face brightening with genuine warmth. "Darling, you look radiant. How are you feeling?" "Never better," Elena replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Pregnancy suits me. And Marcus must be over the moon. Where is that husband of yours tonight?" Elena's smile never wavered. "Oh, you know Marcus. always working. But he wouldn't want to miss supporting such an important cause. Mrs. Weatherby glanced around the room. I could have sworn I saw him earlier with that lovely Asian woman, his colleague, perhaps. Perhaps, Elena agreed, raising her camera. Would you mind if I got a shot of you with the auction winners? The evening continued its surreal dance. Elena photographed the remaining speeches, captured candid moments between couples, documented the careful choreography of New York society. But now she saw it all differently, the performance of it, the way everyone played their assigned roles while hiding their real selves beneath designer facades. As the gala wound down, she found herself in conversation with several society wives, women she'd photographed at dozens of events but never truly connected with. Tonight, however, something had changed. Perhaps it was her newfound understanding of deception, or maybe they sensed a shift in her status from insider to potential outcast, but their conversation took on a different tone. Marriage is such a complex institution, murmured Patricia Sinclair, her fingers unconsciously twisting her wedding ring. We all make accommodations, don't we? Elena caught the meaningful look Patricia exchanged with the other women, the slight nod that suggested she wasn't the only wife in attendance dealing with a husband's infidelity. It was a club she'd never wanted to join, but apparently she'd been inducted without her knowledge. The question, continued another woman, lowering her voice, is what we do with that knowledge. Elena thought of the hundreds of photos stored in her camera, each one a piece of evidence in the case against her marriage. I suppose that depends on what we want our future to look like. The women nodded knowingly, and Elena realized that her story wasn't unique. It was practically a Manhattan cliché. The successful businessman, the younger woman, the pregnant wife left behind. But Elena had something most of these women didn't: proof, and a career that didn't depend on her husband's goodwill. As she prepared to leave, Marcus finally approached her, his face arranged in an expression of loving concern that might have fooled her yesterday, but now seemed like bad theater. Sweetheart, you look tired. You should head home. It's late, and you need your rest. He placed his hand on her shoulder, the gesture possessive rather than comforting. I'm fine, Elena replied, stepping slightly away from his touch. Just finishing up. Did you have a good evening in Singapore? Productive, he answered smoothly. Closed the deal earlier than expected. I'll probably fly back tomorrow instead of staying through the weekend. Elena nodded, marveling at how easily the lies flowed from his lips. I'm sure Sophia will be disappointed to have her boss back so soon. She watched his face carefully, but Marcus was too practiced a liar to give anything away. I'm sure she's managing just fine in my absence. She's very capable. Yes, Elena agreed, raising her camera one final time. I can see that. She captured him in that moment, confident, secure in his deception, completely unaware that his carefully constructed lie had already crumbled. It would be the last photograph she ever took of her husband. The drive home was a blur of city lights and racing thoughts. In her apartment, their apartment, Elena downloaded the evening's photos onto her computer. The images told a complete story. The arrival, the introduction, the intimacy, the proposal, the goodbye. It was a photojournalist's dream and a wife's nightmare. Her phone rang as she was reviewing the images. Marcus calling to check on her to maintain the illusion of caring. She let it go to voicemail, then played his message. Just wanted to make sure you got home safely. Love you both. Elena looked at her computer screen, at the image of Marcus proposing to another woman, then at her reflection in the darkened window. Tomorrow, she would call her lawyer. She would begin the process of untangling her life from his, of building a future for herself and her child that didn't include Marcus's lies. But tonight, she had one final task. Elena selected the most damning photo, Marcus slipping the engagement ring onto Sophia's finger, and uploaded it to her professional social media account with a simple caption. Sometimes, the most important, stories are hiding in plain sight. Tonight's Metropolitan Museum Gala, a study in revelation. Within minutes, her phone began buzzing with notifications. The story was spreading, one click at a time, through the interconnected web of New York. Society. By morning, everyone would know what Elena had discovered through her lens. Elena powered down her computer and placed her hands on her belly, feeling her child move restlessly inside her. "It's just you and me now," she whispered. "But that's going to be enough. More than enough." Outside, the city continued its restless dance of ambition and secrets, but Elena Blackwood had finally stopped pretending she couldn't see the truth. Through her camera, she had documented the end of her marriage and the beginning of her real life. The final frame had been captured,